It's time for Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, inviting the atheist, agnostic, and skeptic to examine for themselves the evidence for the Christian faith. We are all limited by what we do not know and by the things we think we know but are not true. Dr. Joe Mott earned his PhD at LSU and was a distinguished math professor at Florida State University for 38 years, helping to write 3 math textbooks and authoring over 30 research articles in math. He is now the host of this radio program, Defending and Commending the Faith. Here is Joe Mott.
Hello to everyone. Welcome to the program. Followers of Christ are still being called into action for defending and commending the Christian faith. In the last episode, I ended with these comments. When dealing with the question of historical reliability of the New Testament documents, there are certain rules of evidence and historiography that scholars follow in order to surmise the level of credibility of the documents in questions. I said, it is one thing to claim the Bible is divinely inspired, but still another thing to prove it with any reasonable certainty. If we were to receive a true message from God, it would be reasonable to expect it to pass reasonable test of reliability. So let's consider test of reliability of witnesses or of ancient documents. First, I claim that the New Testament passes the fourfold test for the reliability of witnesses articulated by the former Los Angeles Police Department cold case detective J. Warner Wallace. Much like in a courtroom trial, the questions are asked, were the witnesses present to be able to observe what they claim? Was their testimony corroborated by an independent source? Was their testimony accurate by other measures? Finally, were the witnesses biased against the defendant? If we can establish that a witness was present, has been accurate and honest in the past, corroborated by additional evidence, and has no motive to lie, then according to J. Warner Wallace, we can trust what the witness has to say. Secondly, in past episodes of this program, I have demonstrated that the New Testament passes the 3 historiographical tests for the reliability of ancient literature, namely the biographical test, the internal test, and the external test. Moreover, the New Testament also passes 3 logical tests of authenticity. First, it is historically accurate. Second, it is consistent with itself, with no contradiction in teaching or fact. Third, it gives insight by information that would be impossible to get from any other source but from God. I have not discussed these 3 last tests previously. Allow me to elaborate. In terms of these 3 tests, perhaps the most simple and easily verifiable test is that the New Testament is historically accurate. How accurately has the Bible borne witness to events that have taken place in history? As Jesus put the situation to Nicodemus, saying, if I have told you earthly things, and you do not believe that, then how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things? John chapter 3, verse 12. Not so long ago, the idea that the Bible, much less the New Testament, would have anything useful to say to tell us about history in the secular world was considered ridiculous. Historical criticism claimed that written language didn't even exist at the time of Moses. Also, they skeptically opposed the biblical references to cities like Sodom and Gomorrah or people like the Hittites. All of those things critics considered only myths and legends. The findings of archaeology are constantly confirming biblical events, places, and personages. No archaeological discovery has ever refuted a claim of the Bible. In 1964, archaeologists began to excavate a Middle Eastern ruin named Tel Mardik. There they found the remains of an ancient city called Elba. By the 1970s, over 7,000 clay tablets were discovered that showed a highly developed form of writing was in use nearly 1,000 years prior to Moses. The case of Elba is not isolated. Also, records showed that the Hittites were a dominant world empire. Indeed, artifacts from the Hittite people were included in a museum at the University of Chicago in the early 1900s. Rather, archaeology has only confirmed the Bible's trustworthiness. It is not uncommon to hear skeptics claim that the Bible is full of contradictions. The Bible, however, has a different view. In Psalm 126, verse 6, David declared, "The words of the Lord are pure words, like silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Psalm 19, verses 7 through 9 say, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." To be sure, there are several difficult passages in the Bible that require us to dig for their true meaning. But when alleged contradictions in the Bible are seen in context, and with an understanding of the culture and language of the day, the problems are easily resolved, and instead of contradictions, we find concrete answers. There is a phrase I learned in college that has stood the test of time. The phrase goes like this: a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. That is, it leads to a disastrous interpretation. Allow me to refer to one example. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus quoted Exodus chapter 21, verses 23 through 25, where he said, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also." Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 and 39. Skeptics go berserk over this verse. They say, which do we do? Get even or turn the other cheek? The Bible clearly contradicts itself. Really? I think not. Exodus 21 tells us that God was laying down the civil laws to govern the nation of Israel. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was directing his comments to the lives of individual people. The fact of the matter is there are certain rights and privileges that are appropriate for a government that are not appropriate for the average person. For example, if someone robbed your house, the civil authorities can track down, arrest, try, and toss the criminal in jail. That is considered justice. But for you or me to hunt down the burglar, tie him up and imprison him in a basement for 5 years would be considered kidnapping. From God's point of view, justice was to be swift and the punishment should fit the crime. But in personal dealings, God's people were to be characterized by mercy and compassion, not by an instant desire for revenge. Now, in terms of the third logical test of authenticity, let's discuss the supernatural quality of predictive prophecy. The Lord throws down an interesting challenge to skeptics. He says in Isaiah chapter 41, verses 21 to 23, "Present your case. Bring forth your strong reasons. Let them bring forth and show us what will happen. Let them show the former things what they were, that we may consider them and know the latter end of them. Or declare to us things to come. Show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Yes, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and see it together." The book of Isaiah continues discussing predictive prophecy. In Isaiah chapter 42, verses 8 and 9, God throws down another interesting challenge. "I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory I will not give another, nor my praise to carved images. Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them." And in Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 and 10, Isaiah records God's words. "Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure." Two examples of prophecies given hundreds of years before Jesus' birth in Bethlehem. One discusses the birth of Jesus in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, and the other his death in Psalms chapter 22, verse 18. The latter verse says, "They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." The Bible does not give confusing messages about Christ's birth and death. Instead, they remarkably fulfilled Old Testament prophecy. Jesus was born of a virgin, and it was predicted his name would be called Emmanuel. Isaiah chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Jesus himself claimed to be a fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 53. Which portrays a substitutionary sacrifice. His words recorded in Luke chapter 22, verse 37 says, "For I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors. For the things concerning me have an end." Jesus was quoting Isaiah chapter 53, verse 12b. Indeed, Isaiah chapter 53 is one of the most precise predictions we find in the Scriptures. It so clearly refers to the crucifixion of Jesus that the Judaism's Old Testament Scriptures omit the entire chapter of Isaiah chapter 53. Although this passage, Isaiah 53, sounds like it came from one of Jesus' disciples, it was written 700 years before the birth of Jesus. The supernatural nature of predictive prophecy confirms that the Bible is in fact the Word of God. Zechariah chapter 12 verse 10b says, They will look upon me whom they have pierced, referring to the spear that was thrust into Jesus' midriff on the cross, where blood and water proceeded forth, verifying that Jesus was already dead when he was taken down from the cross. Allow me to close this episode by reminding you, exercise daily, walk with God.
Thank you for listening to Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, a production of Wave 94 Radio in Tallahassee, Florida. If you have any questions or comments for Joe, please forward them to Doug Apple at Wave94 at this email address, dougapple@wave94.com. And be sure to join us every Monday evening at 6:45 p.m. on Wave 94 and subscribe through your favorite podcast app. Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott.